Hi, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're talking all things denim and the elements that make denim heads fall in love with denim, and how to translate that care and attention to detail into 3D. To create a great 3D denim, you need to apply a few more levels of detail than normal, mostly done within the texturizing part of the process. We also need to think about the processes of a denim and try and follow a similar workflow. And with this we can break the story of a jean down into 4 stages. 1. Construction and fabric. 2. Seams. 3. Dry process. And 4. Garment wash. Each of these stages will add more realism to your denim. And the great thing is, you can create realistic denims by achieving only some of these stages. You can select which stages you really want to achieve, and in the level of detail you wish. So let's jump straight in and learn about stage 1, construction and fabric. Now, construction and sewing is very similar to other styles in 3D. So we're not going to go into too much detail about this. However, there are some key parts to focus on. There are some detailed parts of denim. One is the belt loop, and we're going to apply one here to show you a few tips. We clone the edge by offset by 2, by 0.6 centimeters. Then fold the middle internal lines. We sew the outer lines to the inside lines. And we sew the fold lines on the belt loops to the waistband and the front leg piece. We then dress. And a reminder that small pieces, especially parts like belt loops, need to have a lower grid size to simulate properly. Now everyone owns a pair of jeans. If you take a close look at yours, you will see that because of the washing, the seams are never completely straight like other garments. You will notice that the seams are slightly wavy, and depending on which way the seam is pressed, will affect how the jean looks. Most jeans follow a very similar construction. For example, the inside seam pressed to the side, the waistband folded or doubled, and a French seam inside back yoke. Again, take a look at your jeans to check. Now it's very important to make sure that the seam constructions are correct. Your eye knows which way a seam is meant to be and will notice if something is incorrect. Let's take the back yoke and pocket as an example here. You can see that the seams are automatically set to pressed open. If we change these to directional, it looks correct. We need to make sure to do this for all seams, and if in doubt, look at your jeans. Now a tip, if you want to take your denims to the next level, is applying a small amount of shrink to the seams to create that slight waviness you get in real jeans. If we select the back pocket and click on the line property, if we select shrink but actually put a minus, this will actually stretch it. We recommend somewhere between -2 and -5. We then put width 1 centimeter, the same width as a normal seam. We dress. And you can see what happens to the seam. The tip is, the smaller the grid size you have for this, the more wrinkles you will then see. Another detail to add to the block before we start texturizing is wrinkles, or baking in denim terms. Now we take a completely plain one color artwork. We change the material blending mode to multiply, then recolor to white so it is completely invisible. I've created a very simple wrinkle detail here by taking the same size artboard as the plain artwork and using the brush tool in Photoshop and generating a normal map. We apply the normal map to the blank artwork and we have baking. You can resize and adjust the normal map to generate how much 3D you wish. Now we have a great base ready. Let's talk about and apply one of the denim head's favourite parts, fabric. People who work with denim will know how important getting the right fabric is. They will spend their career looking at millions of different tones of blues and blacks. And how a fabric washes down is very important to the final look. How prominent the twill line becomes, how wide it is, how intense the slub line becomes. Here you can see on the left an example of a stretched compact fabric, and the other two a more open rigid fabric. It makes a big difference, don't you think? In 3D you can start with a rinse fabric and apply textures to wash it down. Or even better, you can scan your own fabric at a wash down stage to get an even more realistic and technically correct fabric. This is why we've teamed up with Crystal Denim to offer several denim constructions at different wash down points in a new exciting denim library. Here we have some of our favourites to show as a preview. The full library will be available from the Libraries tab in VStitcher and Lotta later this week. So let's apply a few different fabrics to our style. The importance of scanning these fabrics at washdown levels is so that you get the correct levels of blues or blacks. You get the correct way that particular fabric washes down, and in the end you get an amazingly realistic denim fabric. It will also be far more technically accurate when we come to the final style. Try some of these fabrics out on your styles and see the difference for yourself. Now we have our jean in the correct fabric, let's take a look at our seam details. Denim seaming is so important for adding realism, and you can get great results combining our puckering and wash seam tools. But if we want to gain even more detail, we need to look at a denim seam closely. In this image we see the light edge that we get from the wash tool, but you can also see a much darker part under the seam where the wash catches this less. And this is our introduction into the very powerful VStitcher edge assignable tool. Let's create this shadow edge. We can do this simply in Photoshop. Using our brush tool, we brush where the edge will be. We will be using this feature a lot with our denims, so let's quickly go over some recommended settings. Firstly, we drop the opacity down to something like 30 or 40. This means you will get a nicer gradient and natural flow. We then change the brush type to soft, round pressure, opacity and flow. And if you have access to either a mouse or tablet that has touch sensitivity, turn this on and you'll get even more control and natural strokes. We save as a PNG with blank background and bring it back into VStitcher as an edge assignable trim. We then apply to the seam edge, which is under, change to multiply and adjust the transparency and size to required. And you can see the difference this makes and how the seam now stands out far more. Now that's our introduction into edge assignables. Now let's talk about how we can group these into dynamic denim seaming. This is my biggest recommendation and tip to realistic denims. We get great results with our puckering and wash tools, but we can take our seams to the next level by creating grouped seams that include dark puckering, light puckering, and stitch shadow. Let's take a look at our seam in more detail. We will create a new layer and let's use our brush tool. Remember the settings from previous, opacity and flow and low transparency. We then brush over the light puckering areas, going over the same parts to make them more intense. Don't be afraid to add some variation. This will increase the realism of the seam wash. Then we can create another layer and do the same with the dark puckering. We save them as PNGs with blank backgrounds separately. Next, we add them as edge assignables in VStitcher as separate artworks. We will assign the new wash to the edge. We can then group these together. So we include the light puckering, the dark puckering, the stitching, and the stitch shadow. This way we can adjust each one's transparency and colours separately. Let's talk about the seam shadow. This is an edited clone of the top stitching. We have added width to the stitches so that they become a shadow under the stitch. Let's hide the shadow to see the difference. With the shadow hidden, it's clear how much depth was seen with the shadow showing. If we want to create a two-colour double needle, we can clone the single needle and its shadow to create the second needle that can be recoloured separately. We can save this as a U3M library and use this seam for any denim tone and wash level. We've included some of our seams as downloadable assets. They will be emailed to you after the webinar. Feel free to download these and test them out for yourself. And take a look at the comparison. The left uses our wash and puckering tools and you get a great result. The right uses our grouped edge assignables. It may seem a little complicated, but once you have 4 or 5 seams, you will never need to do this again. And you can create super realistic denims like this. Now we get onto the dry process. The single most important part of a denim that makes it different to another. I'm talking about the whiskers, the blasting, the scraping. In production, this is completed in 2 ways, by laser or by hand. We have a great library of dry processes you can use and select in collaboration with Genealogia. We apply to each leg, as each leg is always different. We change the blending mode to overlay. Use lower layer maps. And we can then change the transparency to define how intense we want this to be. If we want to create our own dry process, we have 2 options. We can create in Genealogia software or in Photoshop. If we create in Genealogia, you'll have a huge selection of whisker shapes and details, as well as other great tools. Not only will we be able to import into VStitcher, but we will also be able to send the file directly to the laser machine, so you know that the pattern and the level will be exactly the same as intended. If you're interested in learning more about Genealogia, you can check out their partnership page at Browzwear.com. We can also use Photoshop. If we export the pattern pieces by print by selecting the button here, we then select all pieces as one. We can select fabric materials, seam materials, and artwork and trim on. This will export the pieces with the denim fabric and seam textures, so when we create the wash, we can see how it looks on the fabric. We then open in Photoshop and get something like this. And with our brush tool, again remembering the settings and transparency, we will add a new layer and we can start creating our blasting. On another layer, we can then create our whiskers. Again, use a lower transparency so you can build them up naturally. We will then eventually achieve a wash pattern something like this. We hide the base image and save this as a Photoshop PSD file. We bring this into VStitcher and apply it to each pattern piece with the wash. Then adjust the transparency settings. This way, if we make changes to the Photoshop file and save, all pattern pieces will be automatically updated with the new wash. This workflow is great for speed and freedom, and you can create simple wash templates. Both are great workflows to create your own templates. And you can also create an all-over wash. This is achieved the same way as an all-over print. We apply a grunge image with a transparent background, then select our transparency settings. Then we create an all-over print, replace all, and we can then resize and adjust to our desired wash. Now let's give our jeans some character. If you look again at your jeans, you will notice something called pressure points, where there are more highs and lows. This will typically be around the fly, pocket corners, waistband, and side seam tacking. These wash details really give a jean character, and you can add them the same way as artworks. You can create these in Photoshop exactly the same way as your dry process template, with your brush tool using light and dark colours. We then save this as a PNG with a blank background and import as a graphic in VStitcher. We apply this artwork to the pressure points, like here. And adjust the settings to overlay. Check the option for Use Lower Layer Maps so that the denim texture shows through the artwork. Then we adjust the transparency. You can use the same artwork in multiple places for speed. Just use the gizmo to rotate. You can create different shapes for different areas. We can also apply side tacking. For example, we apply to the edge we want, and then we select the graphic and we select cross. Let's now create some design details. We can scan rips of jeans that we like or pictures. Erase the edges in Photoshop and save as a PNG with a blank background. We then apply as an artwork. We can scale and position accordingly. And like artworks, the handles on the artwork will indicate exactly where we intend the rip to be placed. I can also add abrasions and small scrapes in a similar way. Scanned again from a denim for realism, and apply as an artwork. We can also do edge details like raw edges. Again, we scan and erase. With the hide background option checked, the fabric under the transparent area will be hidden. Apply as an edge assignable, and you achieve this great raw hem look. Now the tone of stitch and type of metalwear makes a huge difference to a denim. So let's see how we can achieve this level of detail and accuracy. For stitching, we can change each stitch colour one by one, or we can use our colours in use and select the colour stitch that is used. Then we can change all the stitch colours at once. For speed, we can also create a colour palette that includes the codes and key stitch colours we frequently use. With metalwear, not only can we include different branding options, but we can also adjust the different finishes. Take our shank for example. We can change the colour, make it shinier or matte. We can also have it distressed if we include a grunge map, giving us more vintage look, and then adjust the colour accordingly. So to wrap up the steps we have learned today, we have construction, showing a common denim belt loop application. We highlighted the importance of fabric and showed a preview of the upcoming Crystal Denim library. We showed how to level up your denim look with custom group seam washes. For dry process, we showed genealogia washes and creating your own in Photoshop. And finally, we finished with garment wash, adding tacking and destruction effects as artworks. You can complete these steps in any order, but if you take the time to apply these, then you will take your denim to another level of realism, both technically and visually. Thank you for watching. We hope that what you have learned will help you to produce realistic denims and designs, and we look forward to seeing the results. For more information, check out the Browzwear Help Centre.